Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the Ban and Restricted announcement, the one that just happened on June 30th. Okay, so there's a lot that I really want to talk about in this video, and I typically don't do this type of formatting for this video. No, normally I go through and I make some slides and I make things to talk about. But there's so many different things to talk about. I really just want to hop directly into it for the most part. Obviously, we're going to read together, just kind of see some of the explanations, at least for the bands that they chose and the bands that they really didn't choose, as well as my overall feedback into everything. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So obviously, the elephant in the room, standard. Corey Steelcutter, Abuela's Awakening, Monstrous Rage, Heartfire Hero, Up the Beanstalk, Hopeless Nightmare, and This Town Ain't Big Enough are all banned in standard. Pioneer, no changes. Modern, no changes. Legacy, no changes. Vintage, no changes. Pauper, no changes. In Alchemy, Corey Steelcutter suspended, which means it's pretty much banned. They're going to make a bad version of it, essentially, for the format. And then in Pioneer Best of One, they banned Tybalt's Trickery. And then Historic Counterspell is unbanned. Timeless, no changes. Brawl, no changes. So, I guess I don't want to give my explanation as to each band quite yet. When we hop into each format, I'll kind of give my explanation as to whether or not I agree or disagree with the changes that they made. So let's just go ahead and hop into it here. Apologize if I stutter a little bit when I read through this sometimes when I'm reading, especially when it's to you guys. Sometimes I stutter a little bit on that. So anyways, howdy gamers, my name is Carmen Comparens, fantastic Magic player I've met in person, by the way. And I'm a senior game designer on Magic Play Design team. Welcome to our mid-year ban and restricted announcement for 2025. So for those who don't know, this is the yearly standard ban list update, which I'm sure they'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But essentially, standard gets a 1-year ban window. They can ban stuff in emergency if they need to in standard, but realistically, once a year, that's when they have standard changes. The previous update to the ban and restricted list focused on changes to Modern and Legacy, with massive upheaval in Pauper, but for this announcement, we're shining a spotlight on Standard. Given the quantity of cards being added to the Standard ban list, I'll go ahead and roll out the red carpet for Jadine to talk about the details of what's changing and why. As usual, we'll be on Weekly MTG tomorrow if they want to talk about it, whatever. I'm not going to talk about that. To jump to our discussion on a particular format, click below. We're just going to go right in order. Standard, obviously, we talked about all the cards that were banned. Today's announcement is our once-a-year early rotation window for Standard. Our goal with this window is to set the next rotation cycle up to be as fun as possible. We do this by saying an early goodbye to a number of cards that have proven their strength and made the format less fun, either by creating unhealthy play patterns or by restricting the viable deck building options available in the environment. Below, we'll discuss these bans and our reasoning behind them, then we'll discuss the lessons learned from these cards for 3 years Standard, which really shouldn't be 3 years, but that's for a separate video. We're announcing the banning of 7 cards in Standard today. 7 is a lot of cards, even for our early rotation window, and especially so since it has been over 2 years since any card at all were banned in Standard. So how do we get here? Well, I can tell you how we get there. Our last ban and restricted announcement was roughly 3 months ago, shortly after the release of Aether Drift. At the time, Standard was looking fun and healthy, which I would semi-agree with. There were 3 decks clearly at the top of the metagame: ride-based aggro, mouse strategies, self-bound synergies decks powered by Nurturing Pixie, and often referred to as Pixie decks in the Domain Overlord's ramp deck, but below those top 3 meta, there receive other decks that stood a fighting chance on any given weekend. I don't think I really agree with that, other than like the Dimir Tempo deck. I think it was really like a 3.5 deck format, but I digress. The release of Tarkir Dragonstorm in April had a dramatic effect on the Standard metagame, propelling Izzet Prowess to the top of the metagame on the wings of Corey Steelcutter. Yeah, absolutely. This card was absolutely everywhere. I mean, this is kind of just like the generic deck for the most part. But, yeah, I mean, really, in general, this deck was crazy. So, let's go ahead and hop into the next part here. So, it's clear that the Izzet Prowess deck is having a negative effect on the Standard metagame. Its play rate numbers are substantially higher than we have seen in Standard in the recent past. Yeah, I mean, this deck is just absolutely everywhere. Like, pretty much like 50% of the decks, it seems like, at least, were pretty much Izzet Cutter decks. And then one easy example is Mono Red, which reinvented itself for an Izzet Prowess world by adopting large numbers of main deck copies of Magebane Lizard. Yeah, pretty much it was like you just had to play Magebane. I mean, the card's just absolutely nuts. I think the card's just really great in general, let alone, you know, like using it as anti-Spells Matters tech. Corey Steelcutter is obviously the target for the Izzet Prowess deck for banning. It is quite simply too strong for the format, a card that's a little bit stronger than everything else. Yeah, I mean, this card is definitely, like, I mean, there's really nothing else you can ban in this deck for the most part to be able to hurt it. I mean, it's really just that good. At this point, it's clear the tools to challenge Corey Steelcutter's dominance don't exist in the format. For these reasons, and in the interest of metagame diversity, Corey Steelcutter is banned, which makes sense. The one thing I want to mention this is, For the sake of clarity and setting expectations going forward, the banning of Corey Steelcutter is the kind of action we would take in any of our ban windows. The level of dominance of Izzet Prowess in the recent standard metagame clearly meets our threshold for bans outside this once per year standard window. So that's kind of good to know, just in the sense that if we see something like this happen, not only really in standard, but anything else again, they're going to take action on that immediately, which I think is at least, I guess, a little reassuring. At least, hypothetically, if this wasn't the standard window, like, it would have been banned. So I guess that's kind of good to know. The release of Corey Steelcutter reshaped the landscape of standard. It's very challenging to predict what will happen to the metagame after its banning, but we have concerns that the format may drift back to the format as it existed previously. To make sure the next standard metagame is diverse and has room for exploration, we're banning 6 additional cards, which I find that funny to mention that, because earlier in the paragraph, they said how, it was really balanced and it was diverse, and then now they're like, to make sure it's diverse, we're banning more cards. So we don't want it to go back to what it was, so we're going to ban cards, even though you say before it was fine. So anyways, I feel like that's kind of like an interesting tidbit. It's like, we know that it really wasn't diverse beforehand. We know that, but you're the one that's out here trying to say that it was. So, but anyways, so the Azorius Omniscience obviously also got a hit. Abuela's Awakening right there is the other card that's banned, for those who didn't know. Because if you really don't play Standard, you probably really didn't know what Abuela's Awakening is. I'm really glad that they banned this card, but I want to kind of save that toward the end of the Standard rant. So anyways, the second most popular deck at the Pro Tour was Azorius Omniscience combo deck with about a 20% share of the metagame. The Omniscience deck has existed in part of the metagame for a while, but climbed in popularity due to be a major player after gaining new cards in Rolling Dragonstorm and Moraine River Regent with the release of Tarkir Dragonstorm. Yeah, I definitely, yeah. I mean, honestly, just when you have a whole bunch of good loot effects coming into the format, naturally that's going to happen. And then, yeah, it's a cheaper reanimation spell than they normally allow, which they've been doing a lot of 4-mana reanimation stuff recently, which is something to keep in mind. Combo decks like Azorius Omniscience are something we want to exist in Standard, but when too strong, they warp the format around them and reduce the number of viable decks. This version of Omniscience has proved too powerful and consistent. For these reasons, Abuela's Awakening is banned. I'm really glad that they chose to do Abuela's Awakening instead of Omniscience for 2 reasons. One, it seems kind of weird with Foundations, like if they banned Omniscience out of it, because it's like, oh, hey, you can play this in Standard for 5 years, but not Omniscience. I think Omniscience is the card that has the potential to be the most broken, just in general. I know it's last time around in Standard, it really was like a non-factor, but I'm glad that they decided to do Abuela's Awakening instead of Omniscience. All right, Monstrous Rage has been powering red aggressive decks in Standard since its release in Wilds of Eldraine. It is one of the strongest and most efficient combat tricks to have ever been printed. We've enjoyed having a combat trick be a strong Standard card, but it's clear that Monstrous Rage has overstayed its welcome. It has enabled combo-style aggro decks more than we would like, and has played a large role in lowering the fundamental turn in Standard and putting players under too much pressure too quickly. In addition, the fact that it grants Trample has decreased the utility of blocking in the format and greatly eroded the efficiency, I don't know what that word is, I'm sorry, of defensive creatures as a counter strategy to aggressive decks. I'm glad they mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was going to mention. For these reasons, and in the interest of eliminating the least fun aggressive play patterns in Standard, Monstrous Rage is banned. This is one of the cards that people have been asking for a long time. Really not going to go too detailed into really anything else with that. Just glad that Monstrous Rage is finally banned. Heartfarer Hero has been another key piece of Red's aggressive deck strength throughout the years of Standard. The curve of Heartfarer Hero into Manifold Mouse puts the opponent under pressure immediately and forces decks to have ample interaction for the early turns. Additionally, Heartfarer Hero's Death Trigger gives Red decks significant resiliency to many kinds of removal. Its strength has shifted the format towards decks that interact starting on turn 1 or 2 of decks that can leverage temporary lockdown as powerful counterplay, which also lockdown's about to rotate, so do kind of keep that in mind. They didn't mention that in the article from what I remember, but we want red aggressive strategies to be a viable option in Standard, but Heartfarer Hero has proven to have too much explosive power combined with too much resiliency. Yeah, these 1/1s for 1, when they die, they deal damage to an opponent. I feel like Heartfarer Hero is way above the curve, like they made like Cacophony Scamp and then Fireblade Charger, which were all pretty solid, but Heartfarer Hero is just like, they turned it up to 11 and it really was just too strong. We discussed banning only Heartfarer Hero or Monstrous Rage, but ultimately decided that banning both was the correct course of action, which I fully agree on. The two cards are both independently strong, and leaving either alone would make it likely that aggressive decks in the format would still be combo-style aggro decks with consistent explosive starts and a lot of burst damage potential. For sure, I agree. I think banning both of them was definitely the correct move. I know that Swift Spear is rotating quite soon, but just as a whole, I think it was a good way to go. All right, Up the Beanstalk is no stranger to the ban list, having been banned in Modern since 2023. At this point, Up the Beanstalk has been clearly cemented as a best-in-class source of card advantage for slower decks. It shares Corey Steelcutter's quality of being challenging to interact with profitably, as its controller will almost be up a full card on the exchange. This means decks powered by Up the Beanstalk are hard for many types of strategies to adapt to, which effectively eliminates them from the metagame when Up the Beanstalk decks are prevalent. The deck building puzzle of Up the Beanstalk has also been solved so many times at this point that we expect it to be monotonous. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. I've never seen that word before. Then engaging, as more cost reduction cards may get released in future sets. We've even felt some of these pains while developing cards and mechanics that have yet to be released. For these reasons, Up the Beanstalk's banned. Yeah, it's the right call, especially at the Pro Tour before. It was definitely a problem. Yeah, I think it makes sense to ban this card. I'm not surprised that it has been banned. It's just in a format like Standard where it's typically slower and you play like these really value cards, especially ones that cost 5 mana, it makes sense that the card gets banned. So yeah, definitely happy to see that banned. It's also nice to, well, hopefully we get a little bit more diversity as opposed to people just forcing themselves to play Up the Beanstalk and play all these specific cards. So maybe we'll have a little bit more diversity in cards. So definitely happy to see that. All right, then they share Orzhov picks. I'm not going to go over the specific decks, really, for the most part. They're pretty straightforward. But anyways, the self-bounce decks have shifted a lot as the format has progressed with just a small, powerful core constant between iterations. Hopeless Nightmare is a key piece of that core, serving the role as a one-mana trinket that is powerful to cast many times in a game. The pattern of constant discard it forces on the opponent is among the least fun elements of the deck and shrinks the game in a way that makes it hard to come back from once the self-bounce deck gets going. Absolutely, it's just kind of insane when they just keep making you discard all these different cards. This Town Ain't Big Enough has seen play in many different standard decks. It almost sees play alongside Stormchaser's Talent, a 2-card package that has proven itself in a variety of shells, which some people talked about Stormchaser's Talent maybe getting the axe. I think this Town Ain't Big Enough is also the way to go with that. I'm not really going to go more to detail. It's just a lot of self-bounce. It's just, you get extreme value from the card, so I'm definitely glad to see that this Town Ain't Big Enough was banned. It's been a little over 2 years since we've announced the shift to 3-year standard. With every set we release, we learn more about how to adapt our design. Oh my gosh, all these weird words I just don't know how to pronounce. Heuristics? I don't know, to this new model for standard. This set of bans is emblematic, another one, geez, of 2 key learnings we'll be carrying forward into the future. First, with a larger card pool of 3-year standard, we need to be more precise with our 1-mana cards and our cards that synergize with 1-mana cards. Absolutely. 3 of the cards banned, they cost 1 mana, and Corey Steelcutter asked to be played alongside the cheapest cards available. The potential for 1-mana cards to define a format grows as the card pool increases, and we've learned that going to 3-year standard is a large step in that direction that we have first believed. Standard is more fun when the stars of games starts, probably, often cost more than, it's stars. Often cost more than 1 or even 2 mana, and we will be taking steps to ensure that that is true more often going forward. I do appreciate that. Second, we need to scrutinize and be careful with the rate of cards that are challenging to interact with favorably. With the increased power level of decks in the larger formats that is 3-year standard, decks are very capable of turning a small advantage into a snowball that ends the game. Strong cards that leave resources behind when dealt with, like Corey Steelcutter and Up the Beanstalk, reliably create that first small advantage. Identifying these cards and evaluating their strength in the context of their interactional requirements is a task that play design is incorporating into our process going forward, which is very nice. They also do talk about the standard upcoming ban. I'm not going to be talking about that. But anyways, so standard. My summary. I agree with everything they did, which is rare. I really like this approach that they made, especially if they're only trying to do 1 standard ban a year. Because if they just ban like Corey Steelcutter or Monstrous Rage, we were going to go back to the same problem where Pixie was going to be insane. And Abuela's Awakening was probably arguably going to be the best deck. I'm glad that they decided, hey, it was kind of like a next man up where like with around Kaladesh, they got rid of all the problematic cards, which I really do appreciate that. I'm shocked that they did that. They never do anything like that, but I'm really glad that they went ahead and instead of just, delaying the inevitable, they went ahead and did that. So overall, standard, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I'm really happy with the changes they made. So we're going to go from a 10 out of 10 to not 10 out of 10 here. Pioneer, no changes. We're happy with the state of Pioneer since our last announcement. The format looks healthy and diverse. Newer cards continue to make a splash in the format, with the addition of Corey Steelcutter to Izzet Phoenix list being the largest change, accompanied by smaller changes like the adoption of Terra Magical Adept and Enigmatic Incarnation lists. I didn't even know they were really actually playing that. None of these changes have led to any decks having problematic win or play rates, so currently we have no changes to Pioneer. Disagree. Simply put, I mean, the mono red deck is like a quarter of the metagame. It's essentially the same deck they play in Standard. It literally plays Manifold, or plays Emberheart Challenger. I don't think that one plays Manifold Mouse, but it's literally just, like, it's Heartfire Hero, Monstrous Rage, you know, the new Boros Reckoner that I'm forgetting the name of it all of a sudden. It's literally, it's the same deck. It's literally the exact same deck, and that was proven in the last Arena Championship, which was Pioneer. The deck is nuts. I don't know how they didn't also ban Monstrous Rage and or Heartfire Hero also in Standard or Pioneer. Like, Pioneer's to the point where the format's so aggressive that, like, decks are like going down from 3-color to 2-color to play a more consistent mana base. Like, you have to have early game removal in this format. Like, every deck is playing like Torch the Towers or 4 Fatal Push or Fatal Push and Cut Down just to really stop all these aggressive starts that are happening in the format. And then obviously the Demons deck, the card advantage is just so insane. Like, basically the Demons deck is just a bunch of cheap removal, Unholy Annex, and Shieldred, and like basically that's the deck. I don't know. I don't agree with this. Like, I don't know how they can say that Pioneer is in a really healthy metagame when it's clearly not. So I don't like that. I would have loved to see either Monstrous Mage or Heartfire Hero go. Probably both of them, to be honest with you. So I'm really not happy about that change, or the lack of change that happened with Pioneer. So Modern, no changes. While we previously announced that there would be no changes to Modern this announcement window due to the ongoing Modern RCQ season, we did want to check in on how we're viewing the current state of the format. The last 6 months of Modern have been a massive shakeup, with several cards moving on and off to the ban list in December, following the banning of Underworld Breach just a few months ago. In the time since, it wasn't clear how things were going to shake out, other than players believing that Boros Energy was going to be the top dog, which absolutely, in some respects, that was true and has remained true for the past few months. Players that assembled the deck to play in the current RCQ season have a pretty good time with it, as the deck has remained the most played archetype in the last few months. That being said, its win rate and share of the metagame has been steadily coming down over time. Core Steelcutter from Dragonstorm and Ketchermos from Aether Drift have both supplanted existing decks in Modern, letting them flourish in the face of Guide of Souls and its ilk. I don't know. Weird word again. Ketchermos in particular has led to further exploration of the previous 2-color Orzhov Blink deck, now splashing blue for Psychic Frog and some sideboard tools. Like, yeah, with Modern, like, I'm not going to talk about this one specifically with Gruul Brood Scale, but, yeah, like, I don't really play a lot of Modern, and from my understanding, like, really, and this has been Modern for the last few years, is, like, Modern's almost always going to kind of suck in some way, to put things loosely. It's never going to be great. You just kind of have to accept it. But from my understanding, like, right now, it's at least okay. It's functional. So, anyways, moving on. Legacy. I'm not a big Legacy, aficionado, but I will still read it for the people that are interested. So, Legacy, no changes, which from my understanding, people are not happy with either Entomb or not Psychic Frog. Yeah, without Entomb being banned. A lot of people are mad about that. But anyways, it's been a few months since we last took action in Legacy. Back in March, the only real way to engage with the Legacy format was by playing a form of Combo, Prisoner, Eldrazi. At the time, our intent was explicitly to remove the negative play patterns of Sowing Mycospawn and take Dimir Reanimator down a peg. Thus far, the results have been mixed to positive. Since the banning of Mycospawn, Eldrazi decks have more or less vanished from the metagame, with Mystic Forge Artifact combo taking its place as most popular colorless deck. The Reanimator, on the other hand, has remained the most played deck in the format, albeit at a lower win rate and smaller share of the metagame. In a lot of ways, this is the process working as intended. Like, yeah, like, people are not... Like, people really want, like, Dimir Reanimator to finally get nerfed. I don't know if they're ever going to do it. Like, it feels like it's one of those pillars of the format, kind of like Daze and Force Will, where they really don't want to do that. I don't know if they're ever going to do that, but that's at least what people are asking for that to happen. Excuse me. Okay, Oops All Spells is a deck that exists on the back of technicalities and technically complex rules interactions. The deck gets its name by not playing any cards that are lands on their front side, then maximizing what it can get out of that restriction. So I guess I skipped over this. So you play Undercity Informer, as well as, I thought that they played the Balustrade Spy. I guess they don't, but that's what they do, is they play all the different like lands, like they play Oh, where they at on here? I'm trying to find, like, yeah, Agadeem's Awakening. Like, that's what they're trying to do, is they cheat on it a little bit. So that's what they're trying to do. Also playing Jack-o'-lantern, which is, I guess, interesting. But that's what they're trying to do, at least specifically with that. It's also banned Undercity Informer and Balustrade Spire, banned in Pioneer for the same reason. Yeah, when it maximizes get out of interaction in its entire configuration, it uses Balustrade Spire, Undercity Informer to mill its entire deck, recursive creatures like Narcobeam and Poxwalkers, and use those creatures to fuel the flashback cost of Dread Return, targeting Thassa's Oracle to win immediately. After sideboarding the deck and dodge Graveyard Hate by using Goblin Charbelcher to reveal 40-50 cards and kill the opponent in one giant shot. As the deck has evolved over time, cards like Jack-o'-lantern and Memory's Journey have helped the deck become more resilient to interaction. To some, this deck can be particularly frustrating to lose to, as it feels like it's abusing Magic's game engine more than it's playing a game of Magic. To other people, it's an illustration as to why Magic's game engine is cool. The deck is doing a bunch of things that it shouldn't be allowed, and rewards having a deep knowledge of the rules and cards in Magic. It puts us in a difficult position of trying to arbitrate whether we think it has a positive or negative impact on the environment. My personal opinion, I've always hated these Belcher spy decks. I've always thought they were so stupid. Like, I don't mind combo decks. I've never minded them. Like, just like, Splinter Twin and I guess Storm, for lack of better. Like, I've never minded them, but I've always hated Belcher in spy decks. I've always hated them. That's a personal opinion of mine. I've never thought that they added really anything to the game of Magic for the most part. So, moving on with Vintage. No updates. During our last update to the ban and restricted list, we had a serious discussion about the possible banning of Lurrus the Dream Den for power level reasons. With Paradoxical Outcome fueled artifact decks being the most popular way to play with the Cat Nightmare, the rest of the format has begun targeting that archetype most pointedly to reasonable success. Mono White Initiative with Clarion Conqueror has had its fair share of winning in the last few months. I think that's the Dragon. Yep, that's the Dragon. That's very good in the format. And Mishra's Workshop decks have pivoted toward using copies of Sphere of Resistance to slow down any deck trying to flood the board with cheap permanents. For now, it feels like Vintage players are exploring ways to exploit the deck building restrictions Lurrus places on its owner and its incentive she forces in deck building. Not to mention, there's an extremely powerful 3-mana permanent coming with Edge of Eternities that we previewed at MagicCon Las Vegas. I'm having to assume Tezzeret's probably going to be pretty good in Vintage. Okay, Pauper. Okay, I think this is the last format we're going to be talking about. Pauper, no changes. We on the Pauper format panel have been closely monitoring the format since the last series of changes. We generally feel the bans have impacted the format in positive ways, and we're happy with the impact that removing Deadly Dispute has had on the prevalence of the engine in the format. The overall health of the format looks great with a lot of viable archetypes. The trial unbanning of Prophetic Prism has gone well, and we feel comfortable leaving that be. You can consider the Prism to be no longer trial unbanned. High Tide, on the other hand, has been a lot more contentious. This is an interesting situation. Looking at Magic Online data, the win rate of High Tide hasn't been anything noteworthy, sitting at about 50%, with some matchups that are some of the lowest win rates I've ever seen for an archetype in any format. For example, it carries a 10% match win percentage against the aforementioned Fairies deck and a sub-30 win rate against the Rakdos Burn decks. Winning only half of its matches against multiple decks in the format it is exceedingly unfavored against normally would have not been a cause for banning again. However, the play patterns of High Tide take a large amount of time to resolve and are cause for concern. We've heard this from many members of the community. It's unfun to sit there while they combo off and cause in-person events to run long as one player continues the combo. This is reminiscent of Players. A problem is that other formats have had, like Second Centers and KCI in Modern, which is kind of funny. It's kind of funny that they literally unbanned it and are having issues with that again. I find that kind of funny. This is certainly not the only deck in Pauper that has non-deterministic combo turns that can take a while, like Cycle Storm. Historically, the play rate of those decks have been low enough that it hasn't been an issue. For reference, noting that the play rate is much smaller, so the data has a smaller sample size, Cycle Storm has a higher win rate than High Tide. So, I don't know. They might ban High Tide, they might not. That's kind of the, it's kind of what I get with High Tide, but they are extending the trial unbanning of High Tide. So, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the High Tide. I don't play a lot of Pauper, but High Tide seems like a weird card to unban just because they're very tricky with wanting a lot of combo in the format. So, yeah. Alchemy, whatever. It's basically standard. Not going to talk about that. Best one Pioneer Arena. Excuse me. Tybalt's Trickery is a card that's already banned. It's not banned in Pioneer. It's banned in Historic, though. Yeah, it's just kind of like a weird thing where they, play a 0-cost spell, and then you play Tybalt's Trickery, and then you, cast an Ugin. It's kind of weird. I'm really happy that they did that. I don't know. I don't play best of one Pioneer, especially. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm glad with the ban. This is just kind of absurd card. They should have just went and banned it in Pioneer in general. But hey, maybe it'll become a problem in Pioneer and they'll officially ban it there. I'm not going to read Historic because I don't listen to it. But yeah, Counterspell's unbanned. Historic in general seems like a really strong format at this point. Definitely stronger than Pioneer, so happy that they went ahead and banned it. Or they unbanned it in there. Timeless I'm not going to talk about. The format's just nonsense. Like, they introduced, like, Show and Tell, and the format sucks. So, not going to talk about that. Not going to be talking about Brawl at all. So, overall, that's the entirety of the entire Banner Restricted update here. Overall, Standard, super happy with the changes they made. Pioneer, not happy. I don't have an opinion in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Pauper, Alchemy, Pioneer, Best of One, Historic, Timeless, and Brawl. I don't have opinions on those, but overall, I'm really happy with this Banner Restricted update. I guess let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this change? Are you happy with it? Are you mad about it? Are you happy that you can finally build some different decks in Standard? Or are you mad that they banned your favorite deck? I guess just let me know what you think in the comment section. So, that's all I've got for you on this video. I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and hope to catch you in the next one.